The orbital chamber was vast enough to hold a city, yet the air felt suffocating to Commander Illyra Voss. She stood at the center of the Galactic Council's assembly floor, surrounded by representatives of species older than recorded human history. Their bodies shimmered with scales, feathers, or translucent membranes, but their expressions, whether carved in stone-like visages or flickering in alien light, conveyed the same skepticism. To them, humanity was an anomaly, a civilization that had sprinted into the stars without permission, too fast, too reckless. Illyra could feel their judgment pressing on her, as though the gravity itself had been altered. When her turn came, she spoke with the deliberate steadiness of someone who understood both her audience and the precarious weight of her words. "Humanity does not come to beg entry," she declared, voice carrying across the acoustics of the dome. "We come as equals, ready to share, ready to stand. We have faced our own wars and horrors, and we are still here. That resilience is our strength." A murmur rippled through the chamber, translated into dozens of frequencies and chemical scents for those who did not hear in sound. The Zorith delegate, a being with a serpentine torso that glimmered like molten glass, raised one claw delicately. "Resilience," it hissed, "or recklessness. You survive not because of wisdom, but because you leap into fire and hope not to burn." Its tone was almost pitying. "Why should we trust your kind to temper the balance of this council?" Illyra tightened her hands behind her back. She thought of the endless simulations her crew had run, the fragile balance of this first impression, and the silent presence of her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marin Holt, who watched from the periphery with quiet intensity. He was her anchor, pragmatic where she was bold, reminding her in subtle looks when to restrain the storm rising in her. Humanity needed restraint as much as defiance, she knew. "I won't deny our nature," she replied, eyes meeting the Zoritha's crystalline stare. "We risk, we push boundaries. But that same drive has carried us here, across gulfs you once thought unbridgeable. We endure climates no one else dares, adapt to environments others abandon. Where you see recklessness, we see necessity. Where you see fire, we see light." From the upper tiers, a voice unlike the others spoke, resonant and almost mournful. Counselor Terra of the Kesh, one of the few sympathetic to humanity, leaned forward. Her avian crest shimmered with a pale iridescence. "Perhaps," she said, "that light is needed again." The old threat whispers still in the void. A sudden tension silenced the hall. Illyra had heard only fragments of these rumors, carried in quiet channels by traitors and mercenaries, remnant of an ancient war, something that had once swept systems clean of life before vanishing into exile. The council rarely acknowledged it, dismissing it as legend or exaggeration. Yet now, here, Terra invoked it openly. The Zarin patriarch lay out a sound like grinding stone. That myth is not for this discussion. We waste cycles on phantom fears. His many eyes closed in dismissal. What concerns us is whether this humanity will upset the balance we have cultivated for millennia. Balance. Illyra nearly laughed at the word. She had studied their history. The endless bureaucratic delays, the centuries of cautious neutrality while border worlds withered or rebelled. Balance, she thought, was another word for stagnation. But she did not voice it, not yet. Marin's subtle gesture caught her eye, a tilt of his chin toward the council seal hovering in holographic light. "Stay the course," it said. "Trust the long game." She drew a breath, forcing the burn of indignation to cool. "The balance you defend," she said evenly, "has already begun to fracture. Humanity did not come here by accident. We were drawn by signals, by stories, by the debris left from battles your records barely acknowledge. We have seen traces of something moving beyond your borders. You may deny it, but we will not." A ripple of unease traveled through the delegates. Even those who dismissed her words leaned slightly forward, betraying interest despite themselves. The council hated nothing more than reminders of threats it could not control. The presiding arbiter raised a hand of translucent flesh, signaling for silence. Its voice was neither warm nor hostile, merely ancient and weary. "Your presence is unprecedented. Human envoy, we will deliberate further before granting any position within this body. Until then, you and your kind are to remain observers." It was not a victory. It was not a loss either. Illyra inclined her head in acceptance, though her jaw ached from restraint. The council would retreat into endless deliberation, but she had planted the seed, and Tara had watered it with that forbidden whisper of the old threat. It was enough for now. After the session dissolved, Illyra and Merrin stepped into the quieter passageways of the station, where artificial gravity felt uneven and the walls pulsed faintly with power conduits. He walked at her side, his silence heavy until they reached a viewport overlooking the stars. Beyond the transparent barrier, the galaxy stretched in impossible colors, veils of nebulae, distant clusters burning against the black. "You held back," Merrin said finally. His tone carried both approval and concern. "I know you want to call them cowards." Illyra allowed herself a wry smile. "They already know what I think. No point in speaking it too soon." Her gaze lingered on the darkness between stars, that place where whispers said something vast and waiting stirred. She felt the truth of it in her bones, though she could not yet name it. "They won't act," she murmured. "Not until it's at their gates." "Then it's on us," Merrin said, his voice steady but low, as though the walls themselves might be listening. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence filled only by the hum of the station. Illyra pressed a hand to glass, not in longing, but in promise. Humanity was small compared to the expanse of the council, small compared to the rumored darkness beyond. But size had never determined survival. Resolve had, in that silence. She understood with crystalline clarity that the coming storm would not be met by councils or committees. It would be met by those who dared to leap into fire and refuse to burn. Humanity had just arrived on the galactic stage, and already the shadows were moving. She would be ready. "Would you like me to continue Section 2 in the same style, or do you want to revise Section 1 toward more action-driven first contact, like started with a dangerous encounter instead of diplomacy?" The human fleet had not been built for grandeur. Its vessels were practical, angular, and scarred by the hard lessons of trial and error. Yet, when Commander Illyra Voss stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the distant void ripple with unnatural light, she felt a rare surge of pride. Against the doubts of the Galactic Council, against their endless debates, her people had chosen to act. And now, humanity was about to face its first real test among the stars. Lieutenant Merrin Holt moved between stations with quiet urgency, coordinating the young officers who had never before seen combat beyond simulations. His presence anchored the crew, his calm diffusing the anxious chatter that threatened to build with each passing second. "The anomaly's density is increasing," he reported, voice clipped. "Energy spikes consistent with what traders described. If this isn't the old threat, it's something close enough." Illyra narrowed her eyes at the distortion ahead. It was not a fleet in any recognizable sense. It was a swarm, hundreds, perhaps thousands, of shifting metallic fragments coalescing into ever-changing shapes. They moved without formation, yet with an eerie coherence, as though guided by a singular mind spread across countless bodies. They did not hesitate, did not posture, did not communicate. They advanced. The first wave struck without warning. Shards the size of shuttles hurled themselves at the Resolute's shields, the impact shaking the hull like thunderclaps. Systems flickered, alarms wailed. Crew members gritted their teeth and pushed through training drills turned suddenly real. Merrin barked orders, diverting power to weapons, recalibrating firing arcs. Target patterns, not individuals. Illyra commanded, "Find a rhythm." There's always a rhythm. Human gunners adjusted, firing not at the swarming chaos, but at the subtle convergences where fragments briefly clustered. Explosions rippled through the void, tearing gaps into the advancing storm. For the first time in centuries, the old threat met resistance and faltered. The victory was momentary. The swarm adapted, scattering and reforming in unpredictable vectors. Alien observers, watching from distant ships, sent frantic reports across the network. Most had believed the danger exaggerated. Now they saw its truth in fire and metal. Yet none moved to intervene. The Council had ordered them to stand back, to let humanity bear the risk of its own audacity. On the bridge, sweat beaded across Merrin's temple as he scanned the tactical display. "They're learning. Every maneuver we use, they counter within minutes. That means they're not invincible, Elara said, though her throat was dry. It means they can be taught. And if they can be taught, they can be beaten. The Resolute's hull groaned under another impact. Systems dimmed and flared. For one terrible moment, the crew thought they had lost gravity, only to feel the pull restore with a violent lurch. Still, no one fled their stations. Humanity had no tradition of retreat in the face of storms. It endured them, stubbornly, until the sky broke first. Elara's eyes locked on a pattern emerging at the swarm's core. The fragments pulsed faintly in synchronization, forming a lattice like the beating heart of some alien beast. It was a weakness, she realized, but striking it meant overextending, plunging directly into the densest region of the enemy. Marin read her expression before she spoke. It's suicide. It's survival, she countered. We won't hold if we fight them at the edges. Cut out the heart, or this ship becomes our tomb. There was no time for further debate. The Resolute surged forward, engines roaring as the crew braced against inertia. Enemy fragments slammed against their shields, detonating in blinding flashes. Hull plating buckled. Fires erupted. Medics scrambled to drag the injured from collapsed bulkheads. Yet the ship pressed on, forcing its way into the swarm's boiling center. Fire everything we have, Elara ordered. Now! The ship's arsenal erupted at once. Torpedoes, rail slugs, plasma bursts. The lattice shuddered under the assault, flickering like a wounded heartbeat. For a breathless instant, nothing happened. Then the swarm convulsed, its cohesion unraveling. Fragments spiraled apart, some inert, others fleeing into the abyss. The center collapsed into silence. The bridge echoed with ragged cheers, disbelief mixing with exhilaration. Humanity had done what the Council deemed impossible. It had faced a shadow and lived. But Elara did not share in the celebration. Her gaze lingered on the tactical screens, where thousands of enemy remnants still drifted. The swarm had not been destroyed. It had been disrupted. Like a tide, it would return, stronger, with new strategies. This battle was only a beginning. Reports streamed in from the alien observers, their tones a blend of awe and alarm. Already, she could imagine the Council's outrage. Humanity had provoked the threat. Humanity had broken the rules. Humanity had won where others had hidden. The paradox would haunt them. Allies would whisper. Enemies would plot. Marin stepped to her side, his voice low, so only she could hear. They'll condemn us for this. Let them, Elara replied, though her chest ached with exhaustion. Better condemned alive than praise in our graves. She knew the cost was only beginning. Humanity's defiance had drawn a line across the stars. The swarm would not forget, and neither would the Council. In the quiet that followed the fading alarms, she felt the weight of every decision settle upon her shoulders. The Resolute turned slowly, battered but unbroken, its course set back toward the Council's space. Behind them, the void swallowed the debris of battle, a silent promise that this was no ending. Ahead of them, judgment waited in a chamber of alien light and cold deliberation. Elara clenched her fists at her sides, already preparing for the arguments to come. For she understood now with perfect clarity. The true conflict was not only with the shadow and the void, but with those who pretended safety could be bought with denial. And she, with every scar her ship carried, would ensure they listened. Would you like Section 3 to lean heavier into the climactic battle, or focus more on political fallout and humanity's new reputation? The Council's chamber was rebuilt in memory and ritual, a place where the galaxy pretended it could still control the tides of history. Yet when Commander Elara Vos returned there after battle, she felt none of its gravity. The delegates sat in their tiers of light, their bodies gleaming with colors and textures alien to her eyes. But beneath their grandeur lingered something unmistakable: fear. Humanity had stood against the swarm and survived. In surviving, it had shattered the illusion that only the ancient species held the keys to endurance. The Arbiter's voice carried across the dome, sharp as fractured glass. Commander Voss, your actions preserved lives but violated law. You assumed authority that was not granted. How do you answer? Elara stood in the circle of light, her uniform scorched from battle yet intact enough to remind him she had not been broken. I answer with truth. You debate peace while extinction grows. We did not seek war, but when it came, we met it. Would you rather we had stayed idle and watched your flagship fall?" A hiss of outrage cut across her words. The Zorid delegate coiled, crystalline scales refracting the chamber's glow. "You twist necessity into arrogance. Your kind will break the galaxy with your recklessness." "Perhaps," she admitted, voice steady, "but it is recklessness that forced the swarm back. If that is arrogance, then I will carry it proudly." Marin watched from the gallery, his hands clasped behind him, expression unreadable to all but her. His silence was deliberate, lending her words the weight of his trust. When their eyes met, Elara drew strength from the simple certainty that she was not alone in this crucible. Terra the Kesh rose next, feathers shimmering with faint luminescence. Her voice was quiet, but carried into every corner of the chamber. "We cannot ignore what we have seen. Humanity fights as we no longer remember how. Their victory was not luck, it was will. Perhaps it is time we remembered that survival requires more than balance." The hall split into a storm of voices. Some clamored to expel humanity. Others demanded alliance. The arbiter silenced them with a gesture. "We will deliberate. Until then, humanity's position remains provisional." It was neither condemnation nor acceptance. Elara bowed her head slightly, then turned away, her pulse steady but her thoughts heavy. Provisional meant they would delay until delay was no longer possible, just as they always had. She walked from the chamber with Marin falling into step beside her, his stride measured. "They'll never forgive us," he said once the noise of the hall was behind them. "They don't have to," Elara replied. "They only need to survive long enough to realize they don't have a choice." Back aboard the Resolute, the aftermath of battle weighed on every corridor. Hull plating still bore scars from the swarm's assault, and the crew moved with the subdued energy of those who had glimpsed death and returned. Elara walked among them, offering words where she could, silent acknowledgement where words were too small. Humanity's resilience was not born only of bold commanders, but of every hand willing to hold the line. When night cycled dimmed the ship's corridors, she studied the star maps projected across the strategy table. Each flare of light marked an incursion. Border stations lost, colonies evacuated, fleets scattered. The swarm had not been defeated. It had been delayed. Every report confirmed what she already knew. They would return, stronger and hungrier. Marin entered quietly, placing a datapad on the table. His voice was low, almost weary. "Intercepted transmissions from the frontier. The swarm isn't conquering. They're mapping us, herding us into predictable positions." Elara's jaw tightened. "They're shaping the battlefield." "Exactly," he said. "We bloodied them, but they learned. Next time, our tricks won't work." She traced a finger across the stars, following the patterns that emerged like a noose tightening around the Council's core worlds. A shiver ran through her, not from fear, but from recognition. Humanity was still a step ahead, but the margin was vanishing. The comms chimed, cutting through the silence. An emergency broadcast filled the air. Another world gone dark, this one deep within Council territory. Panic spread across the networks as ships scrambled and leaders faltered. The chamber of debate would not hold against this tide. Elara stood, her decision crystallizing as if it had always been waiting for this moment. "They won't act fast enough. They never do. It's on us now." Marin looked at her, searching for hesitation and finding none. "If we take the lead, they'll call it treason." "Then let them," she said, her voice hard as steel. "We're already guilty of surviving where they would have failed." Through the viewport, the stars stretched endless and cold. To others they were distant lights, but to Elara they were battlefields waiting to be claimed. She felt the weight of history pressing in, but also the fire of defiance burning brighter. Humanity had stepped into the storm, and there was no path back to silence. As the Resolute prepared for departure, the crew moved with renewed purpose, their fear tempered by the certainty of their commander's resolve. They were small against the scale of the galaxy, fragile against the enormity of the swarm, yet none doubted their course. Elara stood at the heart of the bridge, gaze fixed on the void ahead. "Set a course," she ordered. "If the Council won't lead, then humanity will." The ship's engines ignited, their roar a promise that echoed beyond steel and vacuum. Somewhere in the darkness, the swarm was waiting. Somewhere in the halls of the Council, whispers were turning to fear. But in this moment, on this fragile vessel carrying humanity's defiance. The future belonged not to hesitation but to fire. Would you like me to reshape this Section 3 so it flows as a climactic finale, like the ending of a book, or keep it as an open bridge into further sections? The way I've written it here? Illyra had imagined that victory would feel cleaner, brighter, a moment of triumph etched into history. Instead, the days that followed were marked by shadows. The swarm's retreat had not ended the war. It had only proved the enemy's patience. Reports of incursions multiplied across border systems, each smaller than the Great Assault but precise, deliberate, probing weaknesses. Humanity had earned a seat at the Council's table. Yet that chair felt less like an honor and more like a spotlight beneath which every decision was dissected. The Council chamber was no warmer now than when she first stood there, though the delegates' gazes carried something new. Not skepticism, but wariness. Humanity had bled for them, shielded their flagship, turned certain defeat into defiance. Yet respect was entangled with fear, as though the same spark that saved them might one day ignite against them. Illyra recognized the weight of those glances. In their eyes, she was not just a commander. She was the embodiment of an unpredictable species that had forced change upon them. Merrin had warned her of this shift. "They'll never forgive you for saving them," he said in the dim light of the Resolute strategy room, his voice as steady as the stars outside. "Not fully. You prove what they've been afraid to admit. They need us, and nothing unsettles a powerful more than dependence." She had no answer then, only silence, her mind already bent toward the reports flooding in. The swarm's movements carried a strange intelligence, as though testing the resolve of their foes, anticipating hesitation. Each encounter revealed new adaptations, shield-shifting frequencies, tactics designed to exploit the rigid doctrines of Council fleets. Humanity's improvisation had caught them off guard once. It would not work forever. When the Council gathered to debate their response, the divisions split wider than before. Some demanded full-scale mobilization. Others clung to the illusion of treaties and negotiations, as though the swarm might be reasoned with. Illyra listened, each word echoing with futility. At last, Terra the Kesh spoke, her voice sharp as a blade. "We have lived so long in fear of disrupting the balance that we forgot what balance means. It is not stillness, it is movement. Humanity has reminded us. To resist is not arrogance. It is survival." Illyra's pulse quickened, not from agreement alone, but from the awareness that Terra was taking a risk. Aligning with humanity was a dangerous choice. It marked her as either visionary or traitor, depending on how history chose to judge them. The chamber descended into shouting, but Illyra remained silent, her thoughts elsewhere. She had seen enough of the swarm to know the truth. If the galaxy waited for unity, it would find only ruin. Back aboard the Resolute, she studied the star maps that lit the strategy table in shifting constellations. Merrin entered quietly, carrying with him the scent of recycled air and fatigue. He placed a datapad beside her, its screen filled with intercepted transmissions. "Border outposts abandoned," he summarized. "Civilians fleeing deeper into Council space. The swarm isn't conquering, it's herding." Illyra frowned. "Toward what?" "That's what worries me," he admitted. "They're not just learning from us. They're guiding us." The realization settled like ice in her veins. The swarm's attacks were not random incursions. They were shaping the battlefield, forcing the galaxy into positions of weakness. Humanity's defiance had altered the equation, but perhaps only accelerated the enemy's design. For hours, she and Merrin debated strategies, tracing hypothetical campaigns across the starfield. Each plan ended the same way: victory bought in blood, temporary and fragile, yet beneath the weight of hopelessness. Illyra felt the ember of something fiercer. Humanity had never survived by perfection. It had survived by refusing to accept inevitability. Later, as the ship drifted in the quiet gulf between stars, Illyra stood at the viewport again. Beyond the glass, the galaxy stretched in its endless silence, but she no longer felt small beneath it. She saw instead a theater of war, a canvas upon which humanity's defiance would be written. For the first time, she realized that the central conflict was not merely between humanity and the swarm, nor even between humanity and the Council. It was a collision of two truths: the galaxy's demand for order, and her people's refusal to be contained by it. Marin joined her, as he always did, his voice low and steady. They'll come for us first, not the swarm, the council. When fear outweighs need, they'll try to silence us. She nodded, her reflection in the glass unflinching. Then we'll remind them why they fear us. The ship's comms chimed, interrupting the fragile silence. A new report, another outpost gone dark, this one deep in the others. The swarm was moving faster, more deliberately. Ilara felt the shape of inevitability pressing closer, but with it came clarity. The galaxy could not afford to wait for the Council's courage. The burden would fall again on those willing to act, and she knew precisely who that would be. As the stars drifted past, she turned from the viewport and straightened her shoulders. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. "If the Council won't lead, then humanity will." The words hung in the air like a vow. Around her, the crew stirred, some with fear, others with resolve. Marin's steady gaze met hers, and in that silent exchange lay both warning and faith. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and outmaneuvered. Yet Ilara felt no tremor in her voice, no doubt in her heart. The storm was gathering, but so too was the fire. For the first time since humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, the choice was theirs alone. And Ilara, with every scar and every spark her people carried, was ready to see how far that fire would burn. Do you want to extend this into a continuing arc, Section 5+, that escalates toward galactic scale war, or keep it as a closed 4-part structure with this ending as a foundation for sequels?